So normals. So you might think that this is just a normal map applied. It's not. It's the height map that we have over here. And this height map, we first take the gradient of it and actually the exact the same way as we did before. So we're using the fuzzy gradient. It's not the most precise one. It's just a Sobel operator again. We can look at the result of it just by clicking this one on. There's also show edges. Just ignore this one. It's just inherited from the Sobel operator blueprint. And then there is this texel size, and when we dial it up and down, you can see how we're fading in and out. So, what is the difference between the gradient and the normal? A normal is always represented in all 3 dimensions. Of course, there might just be a 1 in x and a 0 in y and z. And actually, if there is a 1 in x, it has to be 0 in y and z, because it's always a normalized value. So if you imagine it as an arrow coming out from the middle, it's an arrow of a length of 1, always. So we need to get a 3rd channel in, because when we were looking at the Sobel operator, there's only 2 channels here. And there's also another thing, that is this value over here is definitely not normalized at all. So looking at the normal, what's actually going on in here? Well, you can see pretty much all of it if we open up the material. We have a look. This is just for switching the view. So we go over here, and actually if we just look over here, you see everything that we had before. But if we zoom in here, something's happening. We are just adding a blue channel and then normalizing. And the blue channel is really just, it's the texel size that we want to use. And you might think like texel size should be between pixels or between texels in the texture, right? So from center of one texel over the center of the next texel, it's just its texel size. Like, and also, is this not what we calculated before using the get dimensions node? No, not really. No, the get dimensions node is different because it was calculating the size of one texel in UV space. What you have to think about here is that if you have a height map, and in the middle of the height map you have a rise up to 100 meters, and you then take this height map and apply it to a terrain, then if the terrain is only 30 by 30 meters, that's going to be a very steep climb to get up to 100 meters, right? Because the 100 meters is defined in the texture, not in the object you put it on. Whereas if you put it on a landscape that was 1,000 by 1,000 meters, it's not a very steep crawl to get to 100 meters somewhere in the middle and then down again. We're putting it into the set component. We're putting it into the height, the pixel value. And let me just explain that in Photoshop. So let's say that we are looking at just 2 pixels in a height field. So 1 pixel has like this value, this is the ground plane, and the next pixel over has like this value, and there might be another pixel over here that has a slightly higher value again, but the most important, we're just looking at 2 here. So of course, if we were actually calculating this guy, we would sort of be using, well, this one over here and this one over here, and sort of ignoring this one over here. But just for simplicity, we're just sticking with these guys. So let's say that we are denoting, this is kind of like a cut through, like you're slicing your displacement map or your landscape or height field, whatever you want to call it. So this is X going this way, and then sort of like into the distance is Y, and then upwards is Z, the Z direction, because we're using unreal coordinates here. So we're seeing these 2 different values, and we're like, well, this one will then have some value that is like this much, because that's sort of like the difference between the 2 pixels. So that's what we calculated using the Sobel or the more precise gradient. The thing is just reality. If we just put that into X, it's kind of more like going like this way, right? So it's not really denoting what it is that we're trying to get. We also had that texel size thing, so how do we get that into it? Well, how about if we just say maybe that we are going only a texel over, so the texel size is like this, right? And then that amount upwards, right? So at this point, what we get is that we get this line here that I'm just going to draw up a bit more. And this line here is not the normal. It's kind of perpendicular to the normal. It does look like it's the surface because it's sort of is running where the surface is, but then the normal is, if you had, for example, a surface like this, and you, in your favorite 3D package or inside Unreal, asked to see the normals, they will show up like this, right? And that's kind of what it has to be. It has to be an arrow coming out of the surface, not running along the surface. So we need the perpendicular going this way. So how do we get that? Well, actually, to get that, we just rotate it 90 degrees. Who would have thought? That doesn't seem to be right. I can't see where that goes. That seems all right. Ish. Yeah, something like that. So that's what we need to do, and you might notice now that hey, wait, that's a height of the texel size, and then it is along the x-axis that I completely destroyed. It's not going that way. It's going this way. So it is the negative gradient. It's the minus gradient of x. And that is how we get the normal. So you say, wait, you said it has to be a length of 1. And if this height difference here was something like 3, then suddenly we're going 3 in that direction and we have the texel size going up. Like this is more than 1. How do we compensate for that? And that's where the normalize comes in. And so you will see that the more this value, this offset here grows, the steeper the normal becomes, and because like it will just dominate more. It will be like, oh, maybe it's going all the way out here, right? So now the angle is significantly steeper, and in the same way as if there's no difference between the pixels, you just sort of get 0 here, and it just sort of ends up being just the height. But that's okay, because then you just get a normal that goes straight upwards, which is what you would expect in a normal map when nothing is happening. So the only little detail to the whole scale negatively is that you'll see that there is no such thing inside the material as a negative scale, and that's just because I just flipped the Subel operator. It gives the same result. And yeah, that is how you get normal maps.